Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of the 1023 So podcast. We're, like I said last time, we're going to try to get 12 out, one more this month. So Vaughn and I are going to have to sit down and talk again because I do want to get 12 in the 12 months. At least most people do these like every day or every week, but we're not very good at this. So the intro today is going to be the normal. We don't have sponsors. We don't want sponsors. And even if anybody we ever get on here sells products, it's going to be for information purposes because that's kind of the point of our, where we've gotten with the company. But we do need support, and we always will. To continue as a business, we always have to sell parts, and we make money by doing that. So if you're interested in building your truck, your diesel truck, specifically a 7.3, and you want good information before you buy, you can listen to this, you can watch our YouTube channel, or you can call us. And so the sponsor of this video is going to be us, 1023diesel.com, and you can go to plan your build on the main menu on the website, and you could fill out a form where it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about you and your truck and what you want to accomplish with it, what you already have done to it, and after that you can schedule a call. And you and I can sit down for about 30 minutes and we can go over what that build could look like and also how to get there, and then hopefully explain the reasons we would choose the things we would for you. And I think that's an important part, that understanding the choices you make instead of just making choices with anything is incredibly important. So 1023diesel.com. We do sell parts. We don't just sell tuning. I get asked this a lot. I'm not really sure why. I'm not sure where people are hearing about us, that they don't know that we sell parts, but we do. And we sell almost everything that's worth having for a 7.3. So 1023diesel.com if you're looking to build your 7.3, and we can help you out with that. And again, for the third or fourth time, we have Vaughn on with us, the master engineer in the making. So hi, Vaughn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vaughn, 1023 Diesel. Not sure how I technically feel about that at that point, but we're getting there, I guess.
In the making is the key point.
Yeah, in the making. But I guess today's probably not like I'm kind of burnt out on 7.3 stuff, but I'll try. So
that's fair.
Yeah, what are we talking about? I don't know.
So one of the things you and I were talking a little bit ahead of time, and I think this is kind of a good point, is in business, to exist, you have to exist like as something. Like you present yourself, or people know you as whatever you are. So like, if you take Amazon, like Amazon's just known, like you go on, you buy stuff, and they have lots of reviews, and then it's delivered to you a couple days later. Like, you just need stuff. That's where it happens. And so I'm thinking, like, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'm trying to think where do we fit, in our market? Because we definitely have I would say at this point we have decent, recognition in the 7.3 market, and then locally, with our shop, we do everything. But it's I'm trying to figure out how do we be good where we belong, and really that just comes down to education and information. And so kind of in the intro I just said,
that's tough.
It's really tough for sure. We want people to understand the choices they're making when it comes to putting together a build for your truck, especially because a lot of the people that we deal with, they're people that have the reason they're willing to spend a lot of money building their truck is because they want it to be good and they want it to last. And when there's so many variables, you've got, a couple 100,000, 300, 400,000 miles on your truck or whatever. It's you kind of I can't just say oh yeah, these are the right parts for you. There is no answer. If you go on to forums and you read, you're going to find, information from people that,
I think it's kind of a trap too. Yeah, and the people and the knowledge that is there kind of reminds me of trade stuff, right? Where it's we don't know why it works, it just works. So do these things, right? Or you heard it from somebody that did kind of know at one point years ago that lived under a rock and still does, and then somebody knew them and they talk about it, and so and so from some odd business, and eventually some companies were talking on certain forums and stuff, and so some information got out. But on the topic of like education and stuff, and I'll let you finish here in just a second, but that is something I kind of want to talk about a little bit, and how hard it is to get from some points to another and still like remain confident in what you do. Because I kind of had a period, and I think you might be too, where like you kind of realize that there's a lot of things that you thought you knew that you really don't know at all, and so now you're clawing back at all of these different fields and really realizing how diverse everything is and how much you actually truly have to know about so many different fields for it to all come back together and for you to explain even the simplest point. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. It's hard because like really the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And I mean, that's the case with anything, but we in general, like it feels like you could give a decent answer for most things that people would understand or care about. Like most people aren't going to want to have, spend, years trying to learn how to build their 7.3. It doesn't matter. Like in the grand scheme of things, that isn't the big deal. So it's like, how do you become an educator? But then like a great educator is someone who doesn't think that they know anything, or they know that they don't know enough. But like, then how do you present that information? And like, how do you be wrong? That's another thing too. Like, we can sit back and we can say a lot, and at the end of the day, you just want it to make sense. Like really, when somebody goes to, like, if somebody calls me and they want to build their truck and they want to decide what parts to get, which happens all the time, what I'm looking for is, I want them, and this happens with people that aren't even buying stuff from us. I literally have spent an hour on the phone with a guy earlier who bought all of his stuff today from someone else, like $10,000 in parts, that just wanted to like verification, like, did I make the right choice? And I'm fine with that, because like, I want people to understand the choices they made and why they made them. And so, but it's really difficult because you can't fit the reasons why, and you feel like you want to explain everything, but like either people aren't at the point where it would matter, like they don't need to understand all that, like all the reasons, or it's too much to fit in a small conversation. And so I don't know, it's difficult. It makes it like really hard to to choose, when you're looking to buy stuff, what to buy. Because in almost every scenario, someone will have been happy with whatever you bought, and so if you read a bunch of forums, this is the thing I hear all the time. I don't read the forums anymore, but if you read the forums, like what everybody tells me is like a 38R and 23880s is a great setup, and like that's probably from the past. It's old equipment. It's things that did
one
work.
time it was.
Yeah, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever. Lots have changed, and but the problem is like, how do I spend 30 minutes on the phone convincing someone who spent 3 years deciding what to buy for their truck that everything that they learned was wrong? Like, it's really difficult. And like, I'm not here to tell people they're wrong. I'm not here to say everything that was ever written is wrong. What I'm here to tell you is like, you need to understand the choices you're making. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really difficult.
Yeah. So, obviously I'm not in the parts world, and there's a good reason for that, but, it's tough in my inbox, like I was just talking a little bit earlier. Somebody buys some stuff and, they want a lot of support with that. They come to us to say, hey, I just bought some stuff off you or whatever. I looked at your site or something, but like, I have no idea what I'm doing with this build, or, this is what it does. We think something's wrong with it or something, or, turns out that like, they give me some information and then I have to diagnose it and go, oh yeah, there's definitely something wrong with that. And so, I guess this, I just got a thought interrupted, but I was talking about, like certain education levels to get to a point of explaining things to people, right? Like,
so I guess really the important part is that we want to have good information for everybody. And as much as like I think it's useful, I think we need to keep doing what we're doing. Like we can sit back and we can say like, hey, you know, we're sharing this information because it's important. In the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. And this is where I struggle too. I'm like I feel kind of silly sitting here talking about 7.3s, you know, 20 years after they stopped making them. But I do think it's still relevant. Obviously, there's still tons of people who want to build them. But how important is this information? I think it's important because this is where we're at. Like maybe someday it'll be something different. But for now, I think everybody who decides to spend a bunch of money, you know, to create something, they need to know the reason they did it. And this doesn't just apply to 7.3s. This just happens to be the market that we're in. But education, why is it important? Why is it not important? Is it important? Like, I feel like sometimes we're the only ones that are educating in this market, but people that do educate a lot of times are doing it for marketing instead of for like actually wanting to teach.
So we were talking about learning things to be able to explain it to people in like reasonable ways, and we always talk about that on this podcast, I think, or at least when I'm on here. And it was kind of funny. So like over the weekend, I was doing some like data acquisition, right? Like some people probably knew that. And I was testing out, you know, a bunch of signals and sensors and lines and stuff like that, right? That's what we're talking about, like 20-year-old trucks, right? Stuff that's so old, I feel like we're reinventing some stuff, but like, or why are we even going into some technology evolving for something so old, right? Well, I shouldn't say, what's it, 26 years, I guess, ish, how old these things are at this point. So, I feel like I on an everyday basis, I'm like coming up with new ideas on how to like make new technology around something so old, right? Like whether it's new internal software or new internal, you know, ideas and stuff that we try to make things go more efficiently behind the scenes. And I do kind of find it somewhat entertaining, you know, still putting time and feeling like at some point maybe somebody had gotten that far, or maybe people haven't gotten that far on the ideas and engineering side of things where, you know, is it worth it to continue going down? And that was my next discussion was like, how much is it worth, right? Because I was doing the data acquisition and, you know, I wasn't super proper. And so when you think about it, like if you want to dive into it, you can't just go out there and start probing around and taking pictures of it, right? Like you actually have to get your measurement belt on, you know, you have to get your book out, you have to research what you're going to look at, you have to come up with a test procedure, you know, you have to figure out all the potential variables that could be in that, write it down and explain, like in a sense, like a lab report of, you know, this is what I did, so not only you, but you know, you can credit your work later if somebody looks at it, right? This is the evidence I have. Like that's the whole point of you can totally be completely wrong, but you have all of the steps you took, so someone can see like you didn't use the right tool here because of XYZ. You know, like you did this probe has some interference in it that could mess with the signal, or you know, I didn't realize that there could be variables in this kind of signal if you know you didn't check battery voltage when you're doing it, or you know, there's a million ways. And so if you don't like go out there and go,
so it's really easy to make it like an improper conclusion, assuming that you're right, even though you tried hard.
Well, absolutely. I think that brings up a really good point of that, right? If I just held on to that information because I know how to interpret that and relate that, and eventually when it becomes more pertinent, I can then revisit it in a more scientific way, you know? Like I can think about what I'm going to look for, build a test procedure, and then go out there knowing what I'm looking for, and then, you know, then you do like a full write-up, full report, so not only you, but other people, you can credit your work and you have the work, and you can build off of that, right? So, I found it funny that, like, while there are some pictures of, like, injector waveforms, right, no one really has any picture of an injector waveform that has, like, actual numbers, axes, graphs, like, actual test procedure data on, like, the actual signal waveform and how to replicate it, right? And so I kind of started realizing, and this is, like, in the world of electronics, like, you start learning building blocks, and then you start seeing how all these building blocks come together to function certain things. And so if you just look up some very specific name for what you think the part or like the device may be called, you're not going to find anything, not because it doesn't exist or, oh, this is wizardry, it's all secret. It's not. It's just that you have to know the building blocks to know exactly the name of what the device you're looking for is, right? So specifically, like the IDMs are pretty complicated, but they're also not, right? So not that I want to get into that discussion about the actual electronics or the waveform or anything like that, but the idea of like, how much is it worth? Do I take this time to build this entire test procedure, on, however many non-existent personal hours I might take to do something like that, for my own knowledge, for what reason, right? Like, it's not technically like sellable information in a way, it benefits me in the sense of education, but how much does it benefit me to build this entire test procedure, to go out and look at these things, right? To go learn the things that I need to do to get to the point of being able to acquire that data and that information and test it. And so sometimes it's just easier for, you to just pull up your laptop with a $500 piece of software and start pressing buttons up and down on a dyno because, it's easy. Now you can say at the end of the day, I didn't really know what I was doing, but no one cares because you push buttons, you thought you knew what you were doing, and then the results came out on the dyno, so you're like, bam, that's how it works, right?
Which is just the...
And I'm not saying that's not true.
It's not improper, but I shouldn't say it's not wrong, but it's not the right information either. Like...
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the
right
audience.
Answer by using a calculator instead of writing the math equation down, so theoretically somebody else did the work to build that calculator to do what you need it to do in that sense, right? Somebody did the math to do that and build that program so you could then punch your numbers in and it came out proper, right? So I don't see that any differently, right? You still got the same number, and for, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, because calculators are really useful tools, right? Because I know how to add, but also adding really complex numbers is very time consuming for very little reason when we have computers that can do it for us, right? It's not saying that we don't know how to do it. It's just saying that if you didn't know how to do it, no one would know the difference. So it's not the wrong answer, right? It's not doesn't not make sense, because it does make sense to do those things. But, when somebody goes and asks you, right, because you think that you tested it on the dyno and you played with some numbers in some table somewhere and some result happened, and then a customer asks you, like, what are your ideas? Why is my truck doing this thing with this setup, with this tune, with this blah blah blah? And you may be quick to respond and say, like, oh, timing bud, or pulse with bud, or
timing
something along those lines.
Timing did it, but every time.
And unfortunately, customers are looking for answers like that, and to be at such a point where you can completely understand like a combustion cycle, combustion reactions, all the chemistry involved and the electronics that are involved to drive it, and, the differences between like what the calibration's actually commanding, and like being able to verify with equipment that that's what's happening. And then, because it's technically not the case, but again, I don't have test procedures to accurately prove all that stuff right yet, is the whole point. But I know there are discrepancies in what we do to what's actually happening, right? But how many people actually know that? Maybe a lot, I don't know. But that information is very difficult for us to find, right? So some of it's safe to assume, but again, customers are looking for answers when they say, why is my truck smoking, or why isn't it smoking, or why is it doing this or that? And they're looking for one word answers and saying like, oh, yep, that timing, pulse width, something like that you can just throw out real quick. That may not be incorrect, but the states of where it's coming from, like, did you truly understand all the chemistry, right? Because, I didn't really have to take any chemistry courses, and I still don't. But do I want to? Yes. How much is that going to cost? A lot. But to understand combustion more than just surface level of, like, you think you read abstracts and you read some technical books on it, right? You kind of have an idea of even high school chemistry at some point is enough to kind of get you through like how a combustion reaction works. But what it actually means, like diesel flow characteristics, and I take that back, diesel spray formation, injector spray patterns, air turbulence, what happens when it starts to compress, when it is compressed, how, because you're moving it so fast that there's a lot of mechanics that happen inside an engine that could totally rearrange everything that you thought about what you're doing, in my opinion. And it gets really deep. But even considering like standard bachelor's of science courses, 4-year programs probably won't teach you enough in any one of those categories to get you everywhere in an internal combustion engine, or even like a modern computer, shouldn't even say modern, 20-year-old computer controlled internal combustion engine, compression ignition. You'd have to take 4-year programs in a lot of different fields to get there. And I'm not saying that would be true, because if you did some form of engineering, you could probably scale. I know you can scale pretty well between the different fields of engineering courses, because a lot of the groundwork's the same, right? A lot of physics, a lot of math, all that fun stuff. But yeah, I think there's just a lot that, to take 10, 20 years for you to gather all that knowledge academically. But, that's not the case. Not everybody does that. There's, very few people that do that, and they usually end up in academia anyway, right? Those are usually your professors and your...
Mm-hmm. Isn't that frustrating a little bit? Like, I guess maybe frustrating is not the right word, but like, it's sad that, at least from the perspective of people that are going to be able to see that information, whatever it is, whatever the field is, like, the people who care the most are not the people who are actually creating anything. They're trying to teach people
Absolutely.
who generally don't care. Like, they may or may not ever do anything with that information that you shared. And like, that's got to be frustrating from the perspective of someone who does understand a subject to the point where they can get to the point that they are a professor and they are a teacher, and like, that's what they want to do is educate on it, because there is no business or field where their knowledge and their capabilities are going to be put to use well enough. And so you're willing to sacrifice that. You've got enough knowledge, you could be worth millions and millions of dollars for creating or building something, but instead you settled for a $60,000 to $100,000 salary to sit in a classroom and just teach a bunch of ungrateful Fs. Like, it's a bummer. Like, from every perspective, it's a bummer. And like, maybe there's a bunch of like, professors or whatever that are just, they found a way to be lazy and just do what they do. Maybe so. Probably so. That's the case with everything. But there's a lot of very educated people that aren't accomplishing good things because they're trying to teach other people to do that. Like, I don't know.
And I think that's a fairly, like, I want to say, like, depressing look on that, right? Because a lot of educators that I know, because when I did reach certain class aspects, like, I was usually really, really close because of a lot of reasons with my professors. And a lot of them really did care. Like, if you really did show you care, like, that's what they wanted, right? Like, those teachers are there, those professors are in that job because of people like me in certain cases that actually did take the time to care about every little word they said and every extra bit of work, I had this one math professor I like to talk about a lot, because he was a retired computer engineer from, I think he worked at NASA and a couple other places a while back. And his wife had passed away and he had a bunch of time on his hands. So he figured, why not start teaching? And so he went and like finished up some schoolwork and stuff so he could be brushed up on modern education practices. But he was such a practical guy. Like, every which way he taught, it was one of the best math classes I ever took. Like, it made math so... It was probably the best I ever did in any math course ever, was with that guy. But I spent a ton of time in his class, or in his office hours, working really closely with everything. And he really appreciated, like, the practical stuff, right? Like, every email that I took, like, time to send to him, like, he would take the time back to reply, like, very in-depth, because he could understand that there were some things I really did care about learning. Like, especially when you're at university, like, I was obviously where I went, a lot of kids are, they don't care. They don't need to care. They're, they're just there. And some of them are really good at that, But people like me, not very really good at school in a sense. You struggle through some ways unless you take the time to find help, and then those people are actually willing to help you. You find plenty of professors that aren't that cool and that nice to take the time to do that. But it's very rewarding. And I guess the point is, like, that's what he lived for. Like, that's what he was doing this for, was for people to just show up and like give a crap. You know, when I'd say like thank you for providing like the extra work that you definitely did on like a Sunday night at like midnight to do this for the class the next day for probably 2 or 3 people to even notice that you did it. You know, and I always found that, you know, some I think a lot of professors do care. And if not, most professors in most universities, from what I understand, at least like large state universities, they have to be involved in some sort of research, right? So they go through their whole entire doctorate program, and then they're just stuck in research for the rest of their life because, you know, that's what they do, right? So they're never done learning, right? They're actually, in most universities, are being funded to push innovation, to push technology, to push this stuff, and that's the documents that I look for. I look for those researchers that did it all day, that like tested it in their lab, and they wrote this little, you know, dissertation, this little lab, whatever you want to call it, that I don't know the technical terms, but documentation that comes out that gets put together and collated in a bunch of other different articles that keep happening. You know, like some of the stuff that we talk about is really old. You know, it's 20s, even older technology, right? Internal combustion in engines and compression ignition stuff. Like it's really old, but there's still some modern stuff in that. And regardless, that's where it lies, right? That's where those people lie. That's the work that they do. That's what happens on a daily basis, and we don't even know it, right? I should say some people don't, but so I don't think it's sad to look at it that way.
They don't. No, this is actually really cool because I guess there's you know, infinite perspectives, and none of my family, including me, nobody that I even know, like honestly in my family, has gone to college. I come from a very you know, not wealthy background, and so it's interesting to see like as much as I feel like I try to understand, like there's a lot of things I don't know, I still have very, you know, set opinions and understandings of things that I'm wrong about, and so that's actually kind of cool. I guess you're right though. Like even I guess if I just open my eyes for a minute, I'd probably see that like a lot of the like universities, professors, you know, leading students or whatever, however that works, are you know, at the bleeding edge of development for whether it be, you know, medical or science or, you know, computer science or you know, engineering or whatever. So yeah, you know, you're right. You're definitely right.
And in my opinion, I think that's truly where the innovation lies, because these people, they legitimately just get paid to do what they want to do, right? Like, so there's no real incentive to be biased towards anything. A lot of universities, from what I have experienced, they don't have a very big thumb on everything that the professors, like the research teams, are working on, right? They're usually, a lot of times they are corporately funded, so don't get me wrong, like there is usually a lot of corporate incentive to do a lot of things too, but when it comes to like, they're a lot of times protected by the university in some standard, right? So they do get to push a lot of innovation, and literally their only goal is to test things and then give that research to the rest of the world, or I guess you could say keep it in their boundaries and teach it to their kids. But that's usually not the case, right? Like think about Berkeley and MIT, where else? Yale, I guess. Like there's a bunch of places that have really crazy technology and research departments, right? That have that's their entire job, is to just bring information to the world. And you could look at it that way, you can look at it in a million other ways, but in my opinion, I think that lies there, not in some corporately funded lab in a building that has an incentive. Just because, I mean, I'm not saying that's exactly how it works, because I do kind of understand the academic and the lab professional and the engineer professionals. They're not really concerned with corporate interests. They're concerned with building really cool products and then learning and building their stuff. And I think a lot of times that kind of rubs corporate wrong way. Well,
that's,
and so
can I interject for a second? Mm-hmm. So that's where I feel like I know this is like a much grander level, and this isn't usually what this podcast is about, but I think it's important. Like that's where I feel like we are like at a crossroads right now as a company. I feel like we're like, okay, like I want I want us to be at the at the edge of deciding or gathering information that's useful, but how do like that doesn't keep you in business. Just like a professor at a college being very interested in whatever subject he's in.
And they still have to teach an entire class or multiple classes for an entire semester. So
yeah,
which got to keep the lights on.
Which pays the bills. That does pay the bills. Like, I mean, that's how they make their money. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, what if their job was to be interested in the development of their field and like, that's all it was. Like if there was no...
And in my opinion, I do think that's a lot of the mindset of all of the students around me, no matter the age, right? Some of them are 30s, 40s, some of them are in their 70s, right? I think a lot of people that leave there, at least in, I should say, specifically the engineering department, the science, the field of sciences, they leave there wanting to do nothing with money. They have so little interest in doing what they do for the sole purpose of profit. They, even personal gains, right? They truly, I think a lot of them care more deeply about just being able to do their work all day, being able to be in a space that they could just do what they want to do and learn. And I think a lot of companies do support that. They allow a lot of their employees to keep their own IP, but still get paid and do their work under the company. They can have contracts and arrangements to, to build products or design have theories and have research development and keep some of that to their credit, which is really cool. I see that in some companies, but I think a lot of those people really only care about doing what they want to do so long as, we get enough benefits to keep my family and me happy. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of professionals and even, some of my friends' parents and stuff that are in positions like that where they've never tried to live extremely rich, lavish lives. They just are in really cool positions and they just want to be in those positions. They get to do fun stuff for the sake of that's what they like to do. That's the work that they're in, the science, the research, the development, parts of their careers. That's all they really care about, right?
Well, and that's actually it's kind of interesting. I'm thinking about this as we're talking now, and so I'm a little scattered on it. But because this is a different perspective than I've really had, but I do know my father-in-law. He was a professor at a local college for I think 30 years, and he taught HVAC, and so I think it's a 2-year course to get like I don't know, whatever it is, a degree, or I don't know what you call it in heating, ventilation, and refrigeration. And like, I guess when I think about it, he, for what he did, that is what he enjoyed. He did that as work before being a professor. He just retired this year. But he also did a lot outside of the college. So like he has the whole summer off for the most part. And he would actually go out to like the villages up here, and he would develop systems for like the fisheries, and then maintain them and teach people, in his own time. I'm not sure he got paid for it, but he didn't. I don't think he needed it for the money. I don't think so. But he did it because he enjoyed it, and he very much wanted to like get better and like educate people on it. And it's pretty cool, I guess, when you think about it like that. Like, I don't know. I go like I said. I'm scattered.
I think
right
people
now,
take great responsibility. Yeah, I think they take great responsibility in their actions, right? If no one else is going to step up to teach people things properly from their angle, at least, I think there's very few people in the world that have the credentials to do that in a personal sense, not like a professional, academic, whatever. The credentials of accepting that responsibility and taking it very seriously. And making sure that their place gets held and that people are learning from them. And I think I find that those professors are like that math professor. He was just an adjunct, like I think those guys are working a lot harder than the guys that have their massive labs and like an entire floor of a huge university building that, you know, they're the heads of departments and, you know, they get paid the most money to talk at conferences and, you know, represent stuff. And I think they take a lot less care in educating their students, and not all of them, but I have been in some situations where I just feels a lot less than that adjunct making quarter of what that guy makes, you know, actually just doing it because he cares about his students learning. You know, like he wasn't teaching an extremely high level class, right? And that was important to him. You know, he was even teaching lower level classes, and that he even took that very seriously, and I really respected that at that university, at least. You know, I think that was really hard to find there. And all of that being said, you know, we were talking about the price to research and stuff, right? Like, it's really cool to innovate, and honestly, I think it's a pretty large privilege to be able to be in a situation, to be able to just spend money or time or whatever to just research things, right? Like, a lot of things have to be stable for that to happen, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in some specific case, right, for us even, like, somebody's got to write the tunes all week, so I can't go out there and probe around. It doesn't make sense. You know, there's no real incentive, in other words, for me to go do that other than my own interest. When there's a million other things that I could be doing and should be doing instead, but that's not going to gain information, I guess, like education in some way, right? So
well, and that's what I guess that's what I'm trying to like. I'm trying. Maybe we're trying to like correlate the like what is happening between these two, like. Like I know for us, just like a little insight. Like I'll put this out there. I think that you are capable of so much. I think you're capable of creating and understanding things that I know that I will never be. But my role in our relationship is to try to find out, like, how do I give you the ability to do what you need to be doing, what you're capable of doing, because it doesn't really make sense, like you said, for you to sit back and spend all week, you know, writing tunes for these trucks. Like it doesn't make sense. Like we can't cover all the topics of things that we talk about every day, but you're capable of more. You're not there yet, but you can. And so it's trying to like find, you know, but then you have to figure out like, hey, well, this business has to exist for that to happen. Like, how do we build this, you know, to the point where we can afford to give you the lab and the tools that you need to build things that you want to build? Like, that's what I want ultimately.
Sure.
Like, I know that, you know, I know that you don't have a ton of interest in, like, you don't want to have to try to run a company. You're like, I just want to create things and understand things. And that's fantastic. But you can't do that without money. Like, and so, but how do you make money? But you can't really make money by selling things to people. Well, you can. You actually, I mean, you can. Like, you can prove it with Amazon or whatever. Like, you can make money by selling things to people that you're not actually explaining.
So I
what
guess
they do.
Here's like, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a difference there. Like, if we're kind of getting into some things, like in some sort of personal interest here, like, I have a very large amount of interest in, you know, the ideas of corporate business and understanding, right? That's what I grew up with. That's what I say. It's what I know, right? Like, I'm very interested in it, which is why it takes away from just the true engineering stuff, right? It's why it takes me so long to like find the motivation to just stick to education, right? And stick to testing and stuff for it to make sense, right? Because I do get distracted by a lot of those ideas, right? Like, you know, we can have these discussions because it is active in both of our heads a lot, right? And, you know, I don't want it not to be, right? Like, it does interest me quite a bit, but I also, you know, I want to push other stuff, right? So, like, so to make our work life smoother, right? Because I think you notice, like, a lot of that stuff on, like, internal wise, I do focus quite a bit on automation, and I always have, on making our workflow, making it make sense for the future, and making it make sense for us to continue to support it and not, you know, not go crazy with it. And so I think there's like who's gonna be here if I'm not doing it, right? So I think that's part of it too, right? Like we've kind of talked like who do you get to replace this position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I think that's part of the equation too, right? Like does it, like we talked about the company not being at a certain place to be able to do those things. I'm not saying I am either, right? But is there somebody else that does know this that you could trust to be in a situation like this, or both of us, or even for company's sake and stuff, right? Like, we talk about that quite a bit. Does this position make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talk about not really if we can't optimize the workflow because of what we do and like the limitations that we have, unless we break the chain of how this system works, then it's only scalable so far, right? And the more we do, the more overhead it acquires, right? And so if we can't reduce those things, certain positions are just never going to be able to be optimized, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I guess that's where like the difficulty comes in, because both of us care about education, and like from the very beginning, like I said, like we want to be in a position where we can, help people make sense of the choices that they make, even on a small scale of the tiny things we do, like building 7.3s. Like it's not a big deal to most people, but that's what we care about. But it's like, okay, well, we can't care about that. We can't offer unlimited support to everyone when everyone doesn't get what we're trying to offer. And so that's...
Well, I mean, okay, so let's think about this. What's the difference when you were just talking about, right? So you have a classroom full of schmucks that maybe 2% of that entire classroom cares about what the professor has to say, but he keeps doing it anyway, right? In a way. And so I don't really see much difference there in the sense of like our customer base versus us, right? So how many people do truly care about what we're doing, right? How much percentage, let's say, even of this podcast? And I think there's a lot, right? I do think there's a lot of people that truly do care about this podcast, and at least the people that do listen to it, I think they care, and that's really, really cool. I think we have a lot of higher percentage of that rate that we were just talking about. But I think we're in the same situation, right? So how many of the percentage of phone calls that we get are people just, asking for help that they don't really care about or deserve, or, I don't know how else to say that, I guess, but...
Mm-hmm. No, I get what you're saying. It's hard to explain without sounding like demeaning to someone. It really is. Like,
absolutely. And I don't mean to sound that way at all. And I'm sorry if it came across like that. Yeah, to our audience, it's not what I mean. I'm sorry, but
yeah, it's difficult.
I don't know how else to say it.
It really is difficult. And I guess that's where I'm at. And like, this is, I guess, more, I get this whole podcast is kind of turning into maybe a little inside to like our life a little bit, that it's important to me that people know good things. It's important to you that we create good things, but you can't do that at scale. And so I guess we just have to decide, like, and like I would like input on, we get a lot of input from phone calls or whatever, but like I would like input, like if somebody's listening to this, like what you want us to do, because like we could become anything really. Like we could, at this point, we could become another XDP style company where we just sell stuff and that's it. You call up and you talk to Amanda or whatever. I don't work with XDP. I don't know, just somebody that can read from a description and tell you whether something's going to work or not. Or you can call and you can talk to somebody who like actually wants to take the time to talk to you. That isn't scalable.
Well, so I guess think about this for a second. Yeah, no, exactly. It's not scalable, but I do want to interrupt you because I think this is something to think about, right? So think about last week's podcast. Remember how I kind of threw up, which you totally weren't ready for, of like the other truck setups, right? So Duramax, Cummins, all the different variations of engines and stuff like that. We talked about how basically we just specialize in 7.3s, right? How do you broaden that, right? And now obviously we have a guy that does Duramax and Cummins stuff, and obviously the shop knows how to answer that. Like we have resources, but yeah, how do you scale that, right? So if you go to that crazy XDP full warehouse, like shipping stuff, we try our best to make sure that we're going to be in a position to get to that point. But let's just say like we did. How do you can't scale that, I guess is my point. You can't say that we can sell everything, but we also have one expert that knows everything. You don't. So you have an expert on each category. Well, that's a lot of overhead to have a single expert to break down every one of those categories, right? Maybe that's
well, I've had thoughts about that. Like, how do we make use of what we're doing that's efficient and is profitable? And, you know, maybe taking, you know, an hour, like whatever it is, like say like let's say all of our mechanics, and we don't keep people that aren't good for everyone, whether it be good for them or good for us. Like, people that work with us, they have to be good at what their purpose is. And so we've got, you know, good, like great mechanics, like people that actually, I'm not a mechanic. Like, I think people think this too. Like, I've got a lot of good information and I try to understand it all. And I certainly have worked with my hands, you know, up until recently, where now I don't anymore. I don't have time. But we've got very, very good people to do their job as mechanics. It's like, well, what if we take like the people that call us for information? Because we have tons of people that call us, like, they don't really spend any money or don't spend any money at all, and they just like need an answer to a question. And I get that. Like, I get, like, if you don't know how to like fix your truck or what's the right choice to make, because it's difficult when there's so many options and you can't just walk into Napa and get a good answer. Like, you want to be able to just like, who is a verified source I can talk to that I can just call them, they'll give me a good answer, and it will save me so much time and headache to be able to get that answer from someone who knows. And so like, maybe we take our mechanics and we say like, okay, well, let's allocate like, you know, 1 hour a week or whatever. Like, your job, like, you have to spend an hour a week on the phone talking to people who are going to call in with questions that and your job is to give them an educated answer, because you do this every day, and like, we expect honesty. But the only way we could justify that, to take them away from their work that they are doing that's important, you know, in the shop, would be to charge for that. But then who is going to pay, you know, $100 an hour, $120 an hour, whatever we charge in the shop, for that to be possible? Very, very few people are willing to, but it's really because like it's an industry
I wonder,
problem.
and maybe we can. Yeah, exactly. But I also start to think like, oh, I mean, you could blame half of that on. Well, yeah, we can blame consumer versus producer. Like, in that scenario, I don't really know exactly who's to blame, because no one wants to spend that money for the time that somebody put into that, right? Like, paid a lot of money to go to university to pay for all these classes, and then maybe even stuff outside of that, right? There's a couple courses, software, like whatever it may be, right? Like, so, you know, somebody paid to get that education, right? And so it's really tough to say like, oh yeah, let me just give it all away for free, right? I mean, I felt that way, and but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of silly to think that,
it's
you know, I'm spend all this
idealistic.
time and money to
It's
just give all my
idealistic to
information
think
away.
that you can just
Yeah.
keep creating for no money. Like, it can't happen.
But I wonder if we take input to say, like, if we somehow formulated an option that said, I will pay $100 an hour to talk to somebody about my problem, is that an option, right? Like, I think there's a lot of obstacles for why that's not the case. You know, I think there's a million reasons why that would never work. But, you know, I wonder, because we have plenty of customers that have responded and said, like, hey, I'll pay you for your time. You know, if you just want to talk to me about this, like, I feel bad, or, you know, we've reached a certain point, like, I'll pay you for your time to explain this to me, or I'll pay you for your time to do this. But, you know, I guess there's a certain point where we value our time, right, too? Because you could go back into that and say, like, those guys really don't want to answer phone calls that day either, right? So then what's the cost worth for those guys to talk on the phone, too, right? And they have to take it away from their job, and so that's got to make sense. And, I don't know, I guess there's a lot of obstacles in there. But I don't think anybody's really ever tried, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's the whole point here, is like, I don't want this podcast, like a lot of people are never going to listen to this, because it isn't just like feel good, you know, this is, you know, advertising for the things they are. Like advertising exists because it makes money, and like, that's the point of a company, and I get that. But like, but that's trained people, including us, to only buy things you see based on, like, okay, how does an advertisement on Facebook for a I don't know, whatever, a bracelet.
You had blenders last week.
What?
You had blenders last week.
Okay, blender. Okay, yeah, maybe. But like, how does an advertisement on Facebook that sells bracelets? Okay, so I paid a marketing company that I totally disagree with the business model. Like, just, as they call, like, drop shippers, right? The guys you see like ads on YouTube and Facebook and stuff trying to like get people to buy their course to figure out how to like sell stuff and make money. Like, they sell you this idea. And one of the guys that I work with, I paid them not because I agreed with that ideology. I don't agree with like this whole like, drop shipping thing. But I hired them because they were so good at Facebook advertising, like targeting people. And so a couple years ago, I was very interested in that. Not the model, but like how they did it, and like, and I think it was gonna. I don't regret it. It was a lot of, like, more than I paid for my last truck to do it, and it was good. But I ended up backing away from the whole thing, and I haven't talked to him in years now because it wasn't what I wanted. Like, it was good information for sure, like to learn how that happened. I appreciate that I know that now, but that business model certainly isn't for me. But the point is, this guy, he made, people say six figures. Six figures is like, there's $1 million in between those numbers. But he made, a couple $100,000 a year. He actually like profited that money by selling like trinkets, like bracelets, like, which is why I bring this up, and rings and like little things like that. But the point is, like, people are willing to buy that because they saw like a funny video or whatever on Facebook. And so, like, what we're trained as consumers to be is someone who just like sees something that your job is not, when you buy, to think before you buy. Your job is just to buy something because somebody told you it would be good. And that's what we're trained to do. And like, I'm not okay with that, because that it doesn't, like I said, like, I want people to be educated on the reason that they made those decisions, but that's a difficult position to be in, which is why this whole conversation comes up. So anyway, I'm not just talking now, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, no, you know how I feel about that. We talk about that fairly often, but the idea of like, whose fault is it? Why the idea of like bad consumerism exists, right? Without getting too philosophical here, right? That whole idea of, who you blame for the ideology that people have about consumer markets, right? Like you're talking at the beginning of the podcast, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, I guess. And you talk about like, what expectations do people have of certain things, right? So when you brought up like company as an instance, as an example, and I will again here too, saying that Amazon, right? What did they turn the consumer market into, right? It's not just, they talk about small business and what the effect that they have across the country and this and that. But I think it's a lot more than that. And it's not just them, right? Companies have been doing this forever. Advertising, marketing.
Yep.
The whole idea is to extract the most amount of money from the littlest amount of effort, I suppose. Maybe not exactly like that. I guess that's kind of a cynical way to look at that. But the idea of saying, like, even shipments, right? Nobody can keep up with the rate at which modern companies have been able to process and ship things, right? And we know firsthand experience of how they make that possible, and how like impossible it is for most people to live up to those kind of expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing about the parts that I think a lot of what we sell are complicated, and they require a lot of hand time and humans and possibilities for things to go wrong, which is very costly in a lot of cases, because there isn't innovation, there isn't software, there isn't things to make sure that goes a lot smoother. They're just people, there's just people putting stuff in boxes, and then they're putting it out for their shipping company to handle, and I think the expectations are pretty tough, and for people like us, where we're kind of a middleman between that, right? Like, we're not directly selling, we don't have a warehouse to sell most of our parts from, so there's a drop shipment aspect to that too. So there's separation that exists, and we're trying to bridge that, right? We always do try to offer the most amount of support from our end, to bridge that gap there. But also, like, the expectations of, well, it does take time for somebody to hand build your injector setup and put it in a box, and make sure it's sealed up right, and make sure it's gonna the label's printed correctly, and it's gonna get to you in a reasonable amount of time, and things vary too. Like, we know in this industry, the load that we or anybody else puts on any one of the vendors upstream can change everything that we thought about how a product was built, shipped, and QC and all that fun stuff, right? The more stuff that's sold means that there has to be a lot more stuff in place to be able to handle that demand, and I think that's where the overhead comes from. I know that's where the overhead comes from, but in a sense, I guess, bringing back to, like, the expectation part of that, like, they kind of ruined that, right? And it was weird not knowing that until we came into this industry, until I got this job, more or less. Like, when I first worked here, the first part of the job, besides building the website, was to handle fulfillment. And totally blew my mind the expectations of just consumers in general, not just our customers, but it brought up the whole idea of customers everywhere on all different platforms, and even our vendors and whatnot. The idea that, I just purchased this on your website, it says it'll be there in 2 days. Like, I expected it to be in the mail today. Where is it? Right. And I know a lot of our time was spent answering those emails and phone calls and text messages, and just, finally we have some sort of website stability. We have control over that now. But that was really time consuming at some point, and it's nobody's fault. It's not our fault. It's not their fault, more or less. Somebody put that in their minds to expect that, because of the fulfillment abilities of scaling so large, right? Talking about the idea of doing stuff in bulk, I guess.
Yeah. And like, how do you find the divide between, creating, yeah. No, it's interesting, and it's difficult. And, like, I guess, like, you have, but, previous to understanding this, I'm just going to use you as an example, but you would have had the same thoughts that everyone that buys from us now has, or most
Absolutely.
people. Like, you just expect, like you said, you buy things, you choose your shipping option, and you move on. Well, the amount of, like, impossibility that goes into creating a website that accurately, charges shipping and quotes time and gives you the information you need and the timelines you need, especially on, like, a custom product, which really, like, because it sells, because that's what created this industry, was saying, we just buy stage 1.5 injectors, buy whatever injector, buy full force, buy unlimited, buy swamps, whatever it is. You miss the fact that, like, those have to, like you said, those have to be built. And so a lot of times there is a timeline. Like, you don't just order it and then get it. And we still get a lot of questions about this, even though, like, we've done what I feel like is our best, which obviously isn't. If it was our best, it would be great. And it's not. To say, like, this product takes 5 to 7 days to ship, whatever. Let's say injectors. That doesn't, people aren't reading that. They just know that they're buying a product and they're supposed to get it. And, if you're used to buying things and getting them in 2 or 3 days, like, why hasn't it shipped in 2 or 3 days? It's like, because it's being built for you. It even though it seems like this is so structured, it is structured, but it takes time and the manpower to do it. And then, like, at the cheapest price as possible. But I don't know. I refuse, and, like, we've probably lost a lot of business because of it, to make choices based on, what is the best price. Like, to me, it's what is the best value. And that isn't to just say, like, a buzzword. Like, there's reasons why things are more expensive. And I personally am okay with spending more money on something if it's the right choice. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate there's a lot of people I talk to now, especially maybe because, like, it is making a difference to some people, a small number, but some people that we try to share good information. That, like I talked to a guy earlier, and I guess, I don't know, he's in Idaho, and he owns a big tractor I don't totally know, but a tractor, like they sell tractors. Like I don't know what brand or whatever, but I get the assumption the guy has plenty of money, and that's not really his issue. But the reason that he called us was because he wanted to just talk to someone who will help him answer his questions about something that, like, this isn't what he does. He just wants to be able to build his truck, and so he wants to talk to somebody who can give him good information. He's like, I could easily just go spend whatever money somewhere. He's like, but I want to talk to you. And this isn't me saying this to brag either, which I don't know why I'm justifying that, but it's to say that I think there's a need for that market. I think there's a need for and a will for people, and I would rather work with people who say, I want to do this, I want to do it right, please spend the time with me and I will give you my money. Like, I'm fine with that. I would rather do that. I don't care. I'm not trying to sell 20,000 IPRs on Amazon so I can make $100, which we could do. I know how to do that, and we did, like, for a couple of months, and then I was like, no, that's not for me. But I want to work with people who want to spend, even if it costs more, spend the time talking to them, so that when they buy from us, they know that they're making the right choice and they understand why it's the right choice, and that's, we're kind of bridging that gap right now. We're like, okay, well, how do we charge for tuning? Because people expect so much out of $120 of tuning. Well, how do you set the expectation of what you're going to receive for that? It's not perfect, especially on these old trucks. Like, there is no perfect answer. Like, injectors change, transmissions change, builders change. You don't know what you're telling me you need, and I don't know what to build you tunes.
Your weather changes, your altitude changes, where you're driving it. Everything changes from vehicle to vehicle, aside from, difficulties we discussed last week. So that makes it extremely difficult. But I'll make this somewhat quick, I think. But I think it's interesting to think about some of, let's say, the products that we sell. And I was talking about demand earlier and saying that things may not always scale well as demand increases, right? And it's tough. And you start thinking about the specialty people that are in certain places that have the ability to design products, and you see kind of what happens as load increases, right? You can't always find the specialty person for the right price to fill the gap, fill the demand, right? So realistically, you can only scale so large, right? And I think we may be close to that point right now with tuning, I think I brought this up last night or the night before. Like, if we start doing any more and things starts, if we continually keep increasing at the rate we are right now, we can't fill that, right? We're gonna struggle into things without, we have hopefully some measures that will hopefully solve that riddle. But if things are the way they are right now, and they had to scale at the rate they are right now, I think we'd run into some difficulties. And, I think about that industry-wide, right? Like, we were talking about products and some of the stuff we sell, and then keeping the level of quality up for a reasonable price and having that capability of fulfillment. I think that's an insane struggle for people on the small business level like us.
I think at the end of all this, what's really important, and we said it earlier, I'll say it again, I genuinely do want the input from anyone who's listening to this, which it's not a huge audience. I do hope it grows, but I'm happy. Like, I'm shocked, honestly, with how many people do listen to this. We want the input from anyone who's listening. And I guess from a, lay all your cards out, kind of a podcast, this is, we're not asking because we need it, which we kind of do. Like, people have to keep buying from us for us to exist. But we want to become what's good and right, not just what sells. And, at the end of the day, like, if going down the path of, what we talked about is the right choice, like I'm okay with that regardless of whether it makes us more money or not. I want what happens to be good. Like I guess that's the end of it. And good is, good is only, able to be defined as something that's better than what it could have been or what it was. And so we're always trying to improve. But anyway, I do appreciate, you guys listening to this. I appreciate everyone who's supported us as a company. And I do look forward to what the future is going to hold, because I obviously have no idea. I'm surprised looking back what we are now and the people that are working with us, which is amazing. I would never have expected this to exist and be what it is, before this started, or even when we started it. I didn't know that this was possible. So anyway.
And we got an awesome team.
Really awesome team. I'll touch on that real quick, and I didn't want to cut this off because it's getting long, but I couldn't ask for a better group of people to be able to work together. And, I know that I don't have the technical skills. I'm not an engineer. I don't have that mindset that you have. I know that I'm not a mechanic, and I never will be. I'll never be a great mechanic. I know that. I wanted it for a long time. I thought that's what I was going to be. But it's not.
I can say that for myself too.
Mm-hmm. And now I know that isn't what I can be. That isn't what I can be great at. I think I could be a decent mechanic, but I'll never be great. And so, and then like Thomas, I mean, man, the guy, he is relentlessly just on top of everything, and yeah. I can appreciate that more than I can say. And I know that I can never have that commitment to consistent service that he does. And I know that I can never, sit in an office and be an office or a service writer. I can't be great at that. But I guess maybe my calling, and I've kind of felt this for a while, is my calling is just to try to find good people and put them together. And maybe that's what I'm good at. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm good at. You just kind of see things in people. You're like, that person is capable of so much. I want them to work with us because I think that it'll be good for both of us. And I don't know.
You can kind of say that about not only just our team, but the stuff we sell, the people around us, the communication that we have between some of the other industry, I don't even call them leaders, but the competitors. I mean, you name it. The people that we usually deal with on a regular basis fall into that category too, right?
Yes, totally. And I'll say this too. Here in hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I know it seems like we just kind of sit down and talk for an hour, but it's a lot more work that goes into it than that. Here in the next hopefully couple of weeks, we're gonna have our first, manufactured guest on. And I think there's probably going to be a lot of controversy, but I hope that anyone who listens to that will listen to this first to say that I want transparency in what we do so that people understand the reasons we do it. Just like I want transparency and the reasons I want people to understand why they buy the parts they buy. But what I ultimately want is that we make the choices that we make to deal with who we deal with on purpose. There's a reason for almost all of them. And that comes from the fact that we've decided we don't want to just be something that's huge. I don't want that at the cost of integrity, and not even my own integrity. Just I want the ability to give good information out there. And so anyway, we're gonna have someone on. It's probably gonna be a lot of people you love it, and a lot of people you're gonna hate it, and that's fine with me, either way. But I'm excited for it, and I am trying to figure out the dynamic of how do we have someone on here that it doesn't seem like we're just shilling for them and becoming what someone else wants, because it is really hard. Like, it's easy to have a conversation. It's really hard to sit down in front of a microphone and talk to someone knowing you're being recorded and have a good conversation. It's a lot different. So I hope that the conversation goes the way I want it to, which is just pure honesty and understanding better about what this industry is. So that's coming up pretty soon. But I appreciate you, Vaughn, and hopefully we'll do this again next week before Christmas, and maybe one of these days we'll get our act together and do this more consistently, because there's definitely a lot to say. But it'll happen someday.
No, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for having me on. Obviously, great to be here, and great to be doing what we're doing. And as long as we can keep moving forward, I'm really happy to be here. So,
talk to y'all later.